So as mentioned in our last lesson, we are heading west, okay? And that includes heading into the American Southwest, which, as you know, at this point in time, still belongs to Spain and Mexico. So Spain had inhabited it for centuries. They had worked to convert the natives to Christianity. They introduced things like goats and sheep and horses and cattle, and they established ranching techniques. In 1821, the Spanish left North America after Mexico gained its independence. So Mexico included modern-day Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. However, they struggled to establish a stable government and economy. And so to try and solve this issue they were having, they decided that they were going to offer land grants to encourage American immigration to Texas. This was an attempt to populate and prevent U.S. takeover of Mexico. So in 1830, 21,000 Americans were living in Texas. This is more than Hispanic settlers, the Tejanos, and Mexico essentially didn't really like this. So, Texas is going to stage a revolution. In 1830, Mexico outlawed further immigration into Tejas, which angered many Texans. Okay, American. When you see the X, we're talking American. When you see the J, it's from the Mexican side of things. The Texans wanted more representation in government, and they staged two revolts in 1832 and 1833. Mexican General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna is in control. He suspends the Mexican Constitution and declares himself the dictator of Mexico. And this upsets both Americans and Tejanos alike. Stephen F. Austin and other Texans petitioned to become a separate Mexican state, but they were denied this request. In October of 1835, Mexican commander Francisco de Castaneda showed up in Gonzales, Texas, and the Battle of Gonzales happens. So the Mexican military is fighting Texans and Tejanos. In February 1836, Santa Anna ends up occupying San Antonio, Texas. I'm sure most of you guys have heard about the Alamo. So the Alamo is a mission located in San Antonio, Texas. And 180 Texas rebels kind of took over the mission and turned it almost kind of into a fort. And so 1,800 Mexican soldiers laid siege to the mission. So when we say laid siege, it means they're cutting off all supplies going in and going out of that mission. So essentially starving them out. On March 2nd of 1836, Texas declared its independence and became the Republic of Texas. And on March 6th, Mexican troops stormed the Alamo and essentially slaughter everyone inside. And so the rallying cry for Americans becomes "Remember the Alamo." So, the Lone Star Republic is born. In April 21st, 1836, Sam Houston led Texas armies to San Jacinto. He won the battle in 18 minutes, and they captured Santa Anna after he had been wounded. They signed a treaty which gave Texas independence and established the Rio Grande as the border between Texas and Mexico. However, Mexico tried to dismiss the treaty, claiming that Santa Anna was under penalty of death if he didn't agree to the treaty, and so tensions still continue. Sam Houston is elected the first and only president of the Republic of Texas. But immediately following his election, they voted to seek immediate annexation or takeover by the United States. So, we feel like things are going along well. James K. Polk, this gentleman you see right here, in 1844 becomes president. He had 4 goals. His first goal was to only serve 1 term. His second goal was to reduce tariffs on imports. His third goal was to reestablish an independent U.S. Treasury. And his fourth goal was to acquire the territories of California and New Mexico. In 1846, the Oregon Treaty is signed with Britain. It establishes the border between Oregon and Canada at the 49th parallel, effectively completing our northern border. But tensions continued to grow between Mexico and the United States, and mostly it's over the annexation of Texas and the establishment of the southern border. Polk wanted to fight Mexico. I mean, that is his plan, but he didn't want to be blamed for starting the war. So what does he do? He ordered his troops to go into the disputed lands. Okay? Mexico sees this as an act of war because they believe the land that the Americans walk into is Mexican land, while the Americans are claiming that it is American land. So April 25th, 1846, a battle ensues. And on May 11th, Polk announced to Congress that Mexico had invaded and shed blood. So he's taking this narrative and he's twisting it. On May 13th, Congress declares war on Mexico. But there is controversy. So the South and the West strongly supported the Mexican-American War, mostly because they are going to get more lands that they can move and expand slavery into and expand agriculture into. Northerners denounced it. They believed it was an immoral land grab that Polk had kind of staged just so the United States could take control of Texas. Polk accused the critics as being traitors, and he said that it was justified and necessary to fight Mexico and protect the Americans in Texas. In 1847, a young congressman in his first term in the House, he's from Illinois, named Abraham Lincoln, comes up with what he calls the spot resolution. And he presents this, okay? He called for Polk to identify the very spot where American blood had been spilled to determine if the bloodshed had actually occurred on U.S. soil or Mexican soil. However, nothing ever really comes of this, but the House does pass a law in January 1847 censuring Polk. And what that means is essentially keeping him quiet, not allowing him to really do much or speak about the war. So war wages on. June of 1846, the United States captured Santa Fe and claimed control of all New Mexico territory. In June 1846, in what would become California, there was what they called a bear flag revolt. So 30 settlers raised their own flag with a grizzly bear on it and declared that California was now an independent republic, just like Texas was. This lasted for about 3 weeks, until January of 1847, when it lasts 3 weeks. There's a military leader who shows up and he's trying to keep control, but California officially is under American control by January of 1847. In September of 1847, Winfield Scott, who is a very famous general, captures Mexico City. And when this happens, Mexico surrenders. In February 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is signed between the United States and Mexico. And it does a few different things. First of all, it establishes the Rio Grande as the boundary between Texas and Mexico, which is what the United States always claimed and wanted. Second, the U.S. was going to pay $15 million for the northernmost territories, which at that time is about half of Mexico's territories. And we're talking about those northernmost territories. We're talking about Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. And while this takes half of Mexico's territory, it increases the United States by another 1/3. It also completes the borders of the contiguous United States. When we talk about the contiguous United States, it's the 48, not including Alaska and Hawaii, that are not connected to us.